Our first word on this list is euphoric. It's an important word for a variety of reasons. You see it a lot in standardized tests, but the EU part is very, very important. Euphoric means that you are very, very happy. Sometimes it means you're very confident, but it always has something to do with good. It means good. The EU in Greek meant good. You see it in a lot of words in English. A eulogy or good things you say about somebody at their funeral. A euphony is a good sound. Euphemus is a good sounding tone. A euphemism is a good word that you substitute for something that might be considered vulgar or a bad word. Euthanasia is putting somebody to death for a good reason. In other words, you're not killing them because you're mad at them. They're in a lot of pain, so you're doing a good thing to them. At least that's what some people say. That's debatable, I suppose. I don't want to get into that. But in any case, the word euphoric should be paired up with the third from the bottom, elated and overjoyed. Our next word is amorphous. Amorphous generally means without any sort of form, without shape sometimes. So the correct pairing, of course, is without shape or borders. It's pretty straightforward. It's from the Greek a, which is sort of like the Latin ab, which means without, and morpha. And morpha was the Greek word for form. You get it in metamorphosis and all sorts of other words. Some of you may have read Kafka's short story, Metamorphosis, where a man wakes up one day and finds that he's been changed in form to an insect. Sort of weird. You might be familiar with it with morphing software, which creates forms. So amorphous means without shape or borders. Sometimes it's used metaphorically to illustrate something you just can't grab onto. Like his ideas were so amorphous I couldn't understand them. They just didn't have any distinction to them. So be careful with that physical versus the mental type usage of the word amorphous. Our third word is the word compel. Compel is not a really complicated word. It means to force or to drive or to overpower something. It obviously is Latin, has that prefix com, which is together. The root, though, is important, pellere, which is drive. We see that in English words like repel, which is drive away, propel, drive forward, dispel, impel, and there's a lot of pels in English, so you should remember that means to drive, and then pay attention to the prefix or the other roots in it, and you generally can get a fairly good idea of the word. It should be paired with the last definition, to force. The next word is one of my favorites, daft. It is a fairly simple word. It's only 4 letters, but it's so effective. I just think it's a fun word. It means senseless, stupid, or foolish, and it comes from an Old English word. It's not a Latin or Greek word. We find that a lot of the words that are complicated are Latin or Greek words. The reason why that is, rather than the Old English, and Old English is just a type of German, is that most of the words that we use in common everyday language are that Old English/German words, so we don't really have trouble with too many of those. The Greek and Latin words are generally a lot more unfamiliar to people, so normally speaking, when we study word roots, we have to study the Latin. But in this particular case, there are a few words, such as daft, that do show up, that are from the original Old English/German. So daft means sort of senseless, foolish, stupid. It has a long history of evolution. It started off as a word meaning gentle, and then it evolved to mild, and then it evolved to dull, and of course when somebody's dull we think of them as foolish, and finally to crazy. I always remember Daft because one of my favorite cartoon characters when I was growing up was Daffy Duck, so that's a good mnemonic way of remembering the word daft. It should be paired up with insane or foolish, which we'll see toward the bottom of that list. Our fifth word is feign. It's pronounced feign. It looks like it's spelled a little weird, and it is. It's one of those old words that used to be pronounced differently. But feign is, I suppose, the best way of thinking of it is just to represent something in a fictional way, to put on an appearance. It's obviously to fake, so it should be paired up to the word says that is defined as to fake or to pretend. You hear it a lot. She's only feigning. She's isn't really ill, and it's a word that you see on tests that almost can be substituted for the word pretend. It's not exactly that, but it can be closely associated to that. I realize the origin is Old French. It just means pretend, but it probably doesn't help you a lot. I don't really see it in a lot of other roots, but you do need to remember that. Some of you might already know that. It's an important word, though. Our next word is strident. It's a quite a bit more difficult word for students. It generally means making or having a harsh sound. But again, it doesn't necessarily always deal with sound. Sometimes it can be used metaphorically to mean your character. Somebody can have a strident tone in his writings or actually in his thinking. It's really a important word to know. It should be paired up with the third one down from the list, having a shrill, irritating quality or character. Again, it's a lot of times associated with noise, but it doesn't really have to be. It's strictly from the Latin stridentum, utter a unarticulate or bad sound. It's not related to the word stride. Stride in itself, as you take strides, is from the Old English, so it's a very different origin on that. Our next word is mediate. A mediator sometimes is something you might be familiar with. Somebody who mediates is somebody who settles disputes or strikes. They act as an intermediary. It also can be used in a less formal sense when you just want to soften something. I want it to mediate the situation, or one chemical might be a mediate type of material for something else. So it should be paired up with the very top definition, to intervene, to arbitrate, or to sort out. It comes from the Latin. It's something we keep in English in a lot of words right now. If you're in the middle, intermediate, immediate, they all have something to do to being in something or right in the middle of something. So mediate is something you should keep up with. Mediator is a legal term. You should be aware of that also. Our next word is consternation. Consternation is a difficult word. It shouldn't bother you that much. It means a feeling of anxiety or dismay or dread or confusion. And it comes from two Latin words. The first is a prefix com, meaning with, and the second one is sternare, which means to throw down. It's if you throw down the rules, it's very strict. Maybe some of you have had parents who have thrown down the law to you, and that means that you probably are feeling a sense of consternation. It should be related to the second one down on the list, a sudden, alarming, amazement, or dread. If you dread something, you might have consternation. The next one, a pedagogue, is interesting, a very interesting word, especially the root ped. Ped is extremely important. In its broadest sense, a pedagogue is a teacher. And that's in a positive way, a teacher, a school teacher, whatever. Sometimes a pedagogue is used in a negative way, though. A person who's pedantic or dogmatic, very formal. And sometimes we teachers are like that, but not always. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a teacher. You could be a pedagogue and have all those negative feelings that you invoke and not be a teacher. It's from the Greek. The Greek pad meant child and agogus meant leader. If somebody who leads children is a teacher. Romans picked that up in Latin, and we use the word pad a lot to mean either a child or to lead. You see the word pad as a child in it. Words such as pediatrician. Ped just means children, and you also see the root ped used to lead. You actually get it in the word pedal or pedestrian and so forth. So you see those a lot, so keep those in mind. The last one on this list is a real stinker, rancid. What is rancid? Well, rancid is not something that's very, very, very good. It means having an unpleasant, stale smell or taste. It's very similar to the word rank. If it's something is rank, it's rancid. And it's straight from the Latin rancidus, which meant stink. We still have that. But rancid is a good word to know. I don't think it shows up a whole lot on the test. It can be used in a metaphorical way, so it doesn't necessarily have to deal with smells or taste. It could actually do with rancid ideas, but it's generally more often than not used in that physical sense.